Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And on this episode, by God, I'm letting John take the wheel again. And I can't believe I'm saying those words.
Yes.
After how badly it went the last time.
Yes.
At least your first words were English this time. That's a big hit.
It's a big ups.
We're really getting somewhere, John. Hooked on Phonics is doing you right.
It's true.
Yeah, so 10th is coming around, and everyone's talking about it, and how there's a lot of new stuff going on. But John over here has been telling me over and over again about how all this new is actually old.
Yes, it is old. It's old. It's ancient texts.
Like, it's all old hat. And here's the problem, though. I wasn't here for the old. I only started playing in 8th edition, which is like new Warhammer by most people's definition. So I have none of the context for all that old stuff. Like, that's just way before my time. So we figured we'd take this episode so that John can really kind of talk through where a lot of these rules previews are coming from. How they might not be as entirely new as you might think if you're newer to the system. And then what we think about them. And, like, spoiler alert, largely pretty hopeful.
Yeah.
I mean, as with everything that's talking about, like, spoilers, though, like, a lot of it we just very quickly come to a point of, like, oh, that seems promising. I wonder what the rest of the context is. But, you know, what is being on the internet if not wildly guessing to create content?
Yeah, don't worry. Like, next week, they're going to show off the whole new box set at, like, Warhammer Fest. So, like, we could just be terribly wrong.
Oh my God, is that next week?
Yeah.
Oh. All right, well, brace ourselves.
Yes, it'd be fantastic.
I really hope that box set is like Indomitus. I mean, I want it to be just like a whole bunch of value in a box. So that all Tyranid and Space Marine players can just grab it with reckless abandon.
Yes. I agree.
Indomitus, you really saved a lot of money. Like, you could buy multiple halves of that box and still come out well.
And, like, Dark Imperium before it, also,
yeah.
You could big stonks for Death Guard and Space Marine players. Like, it was...
Especially Death Guard.
Wild.
Holy crap.
Yeah, you could make it. You could just buy 2 or 3 of those boxes and just be set.
Yeah. They have not made all starter boxes equal, but for 40k, they normally seem to hit pretty well. So, like, I'm pretty hopeful that this box is going to be, like, a whole bunch of cool stuff crammed into one little bit of cardboard. But I guess we'll find out. But
Food.
First, hobby time in games played. All right, John, what you been up to?
All right, so I played a game. I played against Slaves of Darkness. No, I played Slaves of Darkness against Goblins. There we go.
Okay. Did you use the bigger board size?
Did use a bigger board size, made for a much more engaging game. It was still like, we were still just holding our breath every time it came time for the double turn, and neither of us double turned each other. But it was much more of a game. Like, it was back and forth. We really, like, all the way up until turn 4, really didn't know where the game was going. And then by, like, a stroke of luck on my part, I kind of edged ahead.
Stole it.
The Lord on Crackerjack, or Cackerjack, or whatever.
Yep.
He's great.
Big Gator Rider? Yeah.
Monster. But I do think that I need to switch out the, like, Warhammer Underworlds group that I used.
Mm-hmm.
That came with, like, the caster and his 3 dudes. I need to switch that out for 2 units of Corvus Cabal. I just have to find... I can't
for
find...
Deep Strike?
Yeah, for Deep Strike, and also just more bodies.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find Corvus Cabal anywhere. So
I got a box.
I'm going to need to find something to do. Don't you do
I've got a box in that closet behind me.
Don't you do this
right now, John. Right there.
Oh.
It's right there.
You're also going to have to see if your shop can get the Corvus Cabal as well. Because I love the actual model for Corvus Cabal. Right? Like, I often like to 3D print stuff. It is true. There are some models I think are just worth the money because they look so good.
Yeah, Corvus Cabal, whoever sculpted it, was a slam dunk.
Yeah,
Like
like
10 out of 10. Golf claps.
that's how GW will keep getting all sorts of my money. Just like almost all of my Slaves of Darkness stuff is just full plastic because it looks great. And honestly, it was not a hard army to collect. But some of these other forces, whew, they can get like Skaven. Who, buddy? I love Skaven. Can't get the GW official stuff because it all looks like trash.
And like it's expensive and a lot of it looks terrible, which is just
Yeah.
the worst combination.
Other than that, I've been working on Dark Angels. Much Dark Angels. I'm
I've
painting
seen
and
so
building.
much printing. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen so many progress photos.
Yeah, I'm making a very customized force with all like special swords and shoulder pads and everything else. The line got released. Tried to buy it. Couldn't get it.
I think about
Failed.
8 people got it.
Yeah. So I printed one because I don't want to have to wait.
Mhm.
I'll probably still buy the actual model once he's like in stock by himself. Because I
You got,
also
like-
love that model. But
You got 6 to 8 months before that's the case.
yes. So it is what it is. Like,
Mhm.
have fun with it. Just been working on that. Like I just have a lot of Space Marine painting to do. It's been kind of relaxing because Slaves of Darkness is kind of 1,000 things to paint per model. These are just like
Uh-huh.
dudes. They're very easy.
Yeah, when I was painting up my Blood Angels, like when we were gonna do a 40k crusade before everybody was like, "Hey dog, let's not do 40k crusade." I blinked and painted up 2 units before I even knew what happened. Like, I don't know. You forget how easy Space Marines are to paint when you have not painted a Space Marine in years.
Yes.
The big armor panels, especially with an airbrush, God, it's so fast.
Well, like I painted an Intercessor squad, and I was like, I did their base coat of green with like a 3-layer shading, and then like I painted in like the red parts for like their guns and like their shoulder pad red parts. Then I painted in the metal parts. I looked at it, I was like, oh wow, I really only have like 1 or 2 more colors left. I'm done.
That's damn near done.
And I've been on this army. I'm not using enamels because it's a crutch. But what I am using is Tamiya panel liner because I think it really benefits Space Marines. And boy howdy, am I right?
Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of little wedges and stuff you got to get down inside of, and that just makes it much easier.
Yeah, it's a good time. So I'm gonna keep on working on that throughout this week. I really I want to have at least most of the army painted for 10th edition release party time. I don't know if I'll get that goal done, but I think I'll get a lot done.
That's awesome.
What about
Yeah,
you? What are you doing?
I've been doing like no painting. My allergies are bad. And like, not like, oh, I got the sniffles, but some days when the trees start to bloom, I mean, John, you unfortunately know this, like I will wake up and try to open my eyes, and I cannot open them.
Yep.
Because they are stuck closed before I even wake up. And it gets worse as the day goes on. And that has been kicking my ass for the last week. So, like, painting has really not been on the table. Because unfortunately, you need to see to paint or whatever.
Yeah,
So
it is what it is.
I've been listening to audiobooks and building instead. Because I don't need to see all that well to, like, feel how stuff fits together. Which is really helpful. So I've been doing 10th edition prep, much like you have. I have been 3D printing like a fiend and doing a bunch of building. So I built and started to paint before I got my ass kicked 5 orc commandos that I had printed like a long time ago and had sitting around. So now they're primed, they're on bases, they're starting to be painted. I built 6 Tau stealth suits, which were 3D printed as well, and got those on bases and glued down so that they could be used. I got a Tau railgun printed, like the hover tank with the railgun be like, that's printed and almost fully built. I am mid-process of printing a Tau transport, the Devilfish. So that's in process. I also printed a Custodes Telemon Dreadnought, and it's in pieces. I need to like pose and build it. And some Custodes Sagittarum Guard, also printed and glued on bases. So essentially, I'm not really worried about getting stuff painted for 10th edition release, but I want to have options to play with. So that when 10th comes out, the rules drop, there's, a bajillion directions you could run in, nobody knows what's good. For, like, Custodes and Tau, which are the two forces I'm, like, most excited to play early, I will have as many options as is possible. Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
That makes sense.
So I'm not really worried about painting them. Although, now that my Gorgon's done, but we are almost through the 1,000-point month of our AOS Crusade League. And I have not got a single game in, which just sucks. So, like, before I know it, now I have to be ready for the 1250 increase, which is almost upon me. Oh, God.
Yeah, it is unfortunate.
I don't even know what I'm going to put in that list. Maybe another caster?
We'll talk, because I think you have a couple of options.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say because I haven't played the 1,000 point list to know what I need.
Find Josh, bully him into a game.
Not a lot of time.
I mean,
I could try. Or, I don't know, might get wild, play a game when I come down next weekend for Pathfinder.
Maybe
come down Friday.
We can talk
games. That's my thoughts. But yeah, no games played, but a ton of hobby. But again, as always, like, despite the fact that I'm, like, rattling off, like, oh, man, you printed a lot of units. My brain's like, yeah, dude, you didn't do any hobby. Like, if it's not painting, it's like it doesn't want to count it.
It's almost like you're obstinate, you know? Like,
I know, it is unkind to me. I did so much hobby. I was staying up late on nights I should not have been staying up late because, like, oh God, if I just stay up another hour, the print will be done.
Yes.
And I can start a new print, and then it'll print while I'm in bed, and I can change it before I go to work. Like, you're doing the math.
I've done that.
Yeah, I'm really, really trying to knock it out of the park to get everything printed. But now, at the final hour, my little UV cure tube has died on me. Just the shame. So I've had to order a new one. So I am temporarily halted on 3D printing until I get something to cure my resin.
You have sunlight.
But that's going to take forever, and it's uneven. And it's currently not sunny.
Go buy a metal can, like a metal bucket from a hardware store, and then you got to fill the inside with tin foil.
Yep.
And then you got to put it like super glue or hot glue a UV light to the top of it, like the lid, and then cover that lid in tinfoil as well. Drop the model down there, plug it in, and just let it go.
I already have a tube. I just need another UV source. But I just went ahead and bought a wash and cure station.
Oh, okay.
I didn't get the big old monster one, but got the smaller one.
You got the Anycubic one?
Yeah. Yeah, they had two sizes. Like, it's the Anycubic 2.0 wash and cure, and they had, like, the mega size if you had a big 3D printer, or the smaller size if you have a small 3D printer. And I got a little 3D printer, so I got the little one.
Yeah.
I used myself to have, like $120.
I used to have the small one, gave that one to Corwin. Now I use the plus, because Seth had the plus. Now it is mine.
Mm-hmm.
It has aggressors on it currently.
Sick.
I'm not printing while we record. Right over there.
No, it makes little owl noises.
It does.
It's like morning doves.
Wee, wee, wee.
Yeah, it just... Ooh, ooh. That's all you hear in the background while you're on chats with John.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's actually part of my brand now.
I don't know if it's part of your brand. Hard to disagree there, my guy. But really the question is, am I going to hard disagree on the topic? Seth, play the music. All right, John. You're driving this time. I'm in the passenger seat, grabbing the oh shit handle. Okay?
Yeah, grab the oh shit handle because we're going off the cliff. All right? We're just flying straight off.
I don't know if the handle's gonna help me in this metaphor, but
No.
I'm praying.
We're dying together. It's going to be great.
I always knew this would be the end.
Yes. So today's topic is really kind of discussing. We've seen a lot of the previewed rules for 10th edition, and a lot of them are doing a thing that me and Joe did not expect, in that they are going back to an older edition and pulling a lot of rules from it. It seems like they're taking some of the 8th and 9th edition rules that worked well, keeping them, throwing a lot of it away, kind of rehashing some things. Really, the three big ones we're going to talk about today are characters, how they've changed, and how it's almost exactly like 7th edition. Formations, or they're calling them detachments, how they have completely changed, gone back to 7th edition. And keywords, which is a thing that's in other games, but also here.
Yeah, that's really my context, is like my experience with some of this in other games that I guess came from here originally, or, older game design.
Yeah, so first one, we're going to talk about characters and units. Right. It's a very weird mechanic for a lot of people who just started in 8th or 9th to get used to, because in 8th and 9th, characters are these standalone units and heroes that provide an aura buff often, and like they're murder machines, or they do a thing like cast powers, or have like chaplain buffs. But they didn't always used to be like that. They used to just be these cheap little guys that you bought and you put inside of units. And you could put multiple into a unit to make this like really cool super unit called a Death Star. Or you just put them all out throughout your army and have like little duelists running around, which is very fun.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm glad they've done here is make it to where it's limited to only certain units. I think like Primaris Lieutenant can only go into Intercessors, Assault Intercessors, I think Hellblasters, and that was about it.
Yeah, the little foot guy. Essentially, like, little foot lieutenant can go into little foot units.
Yeah.
As you would expect.
It did not used to be that way. It used to be any Imperium character could go with any Imperium unit. So you could take, like, the Preacher from Guard, and the Wolf Priest from Space Wolves, and the Sanguinary, like, Blood Dude, like, Ancient from Blood Angels, and, like, the Iron Hands Tech Marine. And you could put it all in a unit of, like, Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators, and you could give them, like, a 2-up armor save with a 2-up involve and, like, a 2-up feel no pain, because you pulled stuff from 9 books.
Oh, God, no. A 2-up invuln?
Yeah.
That should be illegal.
Yeah. That does not seem like it'll be the case here. It looks like you can only put certain units, certain characters in certain units, which makes sense. It adds to the flavor that is having characters with retinues. I think that is the biggest benefit of having this, is you are not going to just have heroes running around on the lonesome. You're going to be incentivized to take a unit for each of the heroes that you bring.
With the exception of the Billy Badasses.
Yeah.
Like truly, like the biggest, baddest mamma jammas on the field.
Well, like, I think that from an army standpoint, you are still going to want to bring units to protect those, like screening units, that probably have characters in them as well. Kind of like layers of engagement.
Yeah, because, I mean, I was thinking about it, like, Shadow Sun for the Tau, we already know that she's going to be, like, an independent operator, because she's really, she's in a suit, she's super fast, she's the big bad, like, leader of all leaders. I expect you'll also, I think they said Primarchs will also be sort of independent operators.
Yeah.
But they'll probably just be, like, individual murder missiles rather than the sort of aura buff pieces that we're so used to now.
Yeah. Well, I think in some instances, I think where it makes sense, like, Gilliman is going to still be an aura buff piece, but, like, the Lion won't be. I just don't think he's gonna. He will have some sort of benefit to the people around him, but he will be mostly there to jump out of a weird forest puddle and punch someone to death.
I think it'll be the same for, like, shield captains on jet bikes, or Tau, like Cold Star commanders or Enforcer commanders. They'll probably also be independent operators.
Yeah.
Out doing murder.
Yeah, I think so as well. And that's really the thing I'm excited about. I love characters and units. I think it's a very, very fun mechanic, and you end up having a lot of fun with some of the rules involved with it. Because back in 7th edition, we had something called challenges, and I really want them to bring it back because it's awesome to be like, I'm going to move my dudes, and you're going to move your dudes away so we can make our two dudes fight. These two heroes fight in the middle of this pit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you choose not to and be a coward, you don't get to fight at all. Like,
Run away, Erebus! Run away!
yeah,
Yeah. It's flavorful. It's cool.
yeah.
I have thoughts we'll save towards the end, but like I think depending on implementation, this could be really cool and open up some options. Maybe for heroes that before, really the only way some of the heroes made the cut because of the way the game is structured is like how lethal they were,
Mm-hmm.
because lethality was really the only thing that mattered sometimes during 40k. So like a lot of utility heroes just fell by the wayside because the formula was the heroes you take are the ones that make murder good. And anything other than make murder good, probably not going to take them.
Well, it's
Here,
also
though, that is less the case if they have a sick buff that they could give a unit.
yeah, like or a specific keyword, like we'll talk later. Like that was a big thing in 7th edition, is if you take this character, you provide this keyword to this unit that normally wouldn't have it, and that is very good. As we've seen in A Song of Ice and Fire, adding one unique ability to a unit completely changes its role.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's great. It's just good. The next thing that we'll talk about is what used to be called formations, boo, and what are now called attachments, big ups.
I've heard horror stories of formations.
So what made formations terrible?
They were like spooky campfire tales around the game store. Like,
Yeah, so what made formations terrible before was that they were just there was a Tau one, right? I think it was called the Broadside Brigade or something like that, where you were required to bring, in order to bring this detachment, like 3 units of broadsides, a railgun tank, and like you could bring up to 6 crisis suits units and 2 commanders. Right? That's
Okay.
most of an army.
that's almost my entire force. Yep.
Yeah. I think you could also bring a Riptide in that. But it would have
All right, now that is like my entire army. Okay.
it had a very specific set of, you can bring these units in these quantities, and you have to bring these units in these quantities. But the buff they gave was normally wild. I think that one was just straight up +1 to wound across everything.
Holy
Yeah.
Jesus.
The Space Marine one from back then was like, we called it the Razorback parking lot because it's called the Battle
John, are you
Battalion?
telling me you don't remember every rule you've ever read?
No, but I do remember
You
why it was a
poser.
nightmare because I hated it. You had to bring a captain, you had to bring a lieutenant, you had to bring 3 units of tactical Space Marines, and then you also had to bring 3 Razorbacks or Rhinos, and then you had to bring a drop pod, and you had to bring a unit of Devastators. Like, you basically had to bring a little bit of everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what you got for benefits for that was that you never had to pay for upgrades for anything. So you didn't have to pay for, yes. And back then, Rhinos and Razorbacks didn't count as data sheets to get, they counted as upgrades. So when you brought a 100-point unit of Space Marines, it came with a free ride, they got a free whip. So you would take a Razorback, you were in a 5-man squad of Tactical Marines with a Razorback, put that squad in there, give them a las cannon, give the Razorback a las cannon, give it a 100 killer missile. You don't have to pay for anything. So you would basically sit down to a game with like a 2,000-point army that was more like a 4,000-point army.
Every single guy who went on Pimp My Ride, it just ended up with the most incredible thing coming out the other side.
Like, it was at the end of 7th edition, so it existed for like a total of 3 months before it was just gone.
Hallelujah. But sometimes I question how that hits a table. Like, how did this get past rules design?
Yeah, so that brings me to my favorite thing about the new detachments, and that is it is not that. It is instead, you are limited to what options you can pull from. Like I say, it makes your unit pool smaller or larger depending on what detachment you're playing. And then it also consolidates what enhancements and just in general you can take. So like relics, warlord traits, spells, yada.
So you can't mix and match necessarily.
Yeah, like you are forced to play within this detachment's rules as like a sub faction, which I think is a much smarter way of implementing that. Like yes, it's going to prevent comboing, but we don't need to have some of those combos. Like I think some of those end up just being not fun for people.
Well, and it seems like instead of comboing in like detachments, instead they've moved the combos to heroes going into units. Like that's your
Yes.
combo space.
Yes.
That's where you get to like sort of play alchemist and mix all sorts of shit together in weird ways.
And
Just not there.
and in a balance standpoint, it's much easier to just be like, oh, this like character can go in these 6 units. Oh, we didn't realize that if you put it in this one unit, it breaks the entire game. Well, they just can't go in that unit anymore. Boom.
Yeah.
You've made the game more balanced, easier without having to change points or adjust a bunch of different things. Just a much easier. The other benefit I think that this brings is the 6 stratagems on the page. It's a 2-page spread. It's simple. It's easy. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it'll allow them to update armies without full codex releases.
Yeah.
I
Like
think that
putting out different 2-page spreads.
something that I really liked in 7th edition was releasing like Warzone books, like and did it in 6th edition, 5th edition too through Forge World. So like the Taros campaign, which is Tau versus Guard, had like rules for playing a Taros Tau detachment or like a Taros Guard detachment, and you could have those two forces fight each other with those detachments in there, and they had rules like terrain rules and battlefield rules, and then army rules for playing that campaign. And I would love to see that come back because I think that's a lot of fun from like a narrative sense, right? Like they try to do that with Crusade, but imagine if instead you're like, oh, I want to play like a desert fighter style Tau force, and you're like, I'm gonna play Taros. I'm gonna play that detachment because that's what they do.
Mm-hmm. I feel like they've played around with this space even in like 8th and 9th with stuff like Vigilus, where they had armies of renown in there. But for like the armies of renown just never seemed to catch on though, which is kind of the issue.
No.
Either I don't know if they were boring or if they were just not compelling. I mean, or maybe both. But like they were a thing that dropped with more army options while I was really heavily playing 40k because I was just getting into it. And I still never took them. And I think that probably speaks to an issue that they were not impactful.
I think
But
that
here, you have a better chance to swing at that.
it's also like with 8th and ninth edition, it was much easier to kind of hand wave those things because you already had so many options. Like your army itself already could do a billion things because of how many stratagems. Like I'll use Guard as an example. Guard didn't have a ninth edition book for like for most of the edition. I would say like 3/4 of the edition. And they still stayed
longer, probably.
Yeah. Like they stayed mostly relevant, like at least in casual settings, maybe not on the top end of competitive, because of how wide their stratagem pool was. Which is another reason I like these, is that it shortens that. Because some armies are not going to have 37 stratagems. Some armies will only have 6 or 7. And I'm glad they roll all detachments only have 6 or 7. And then shared ones for everyone to use.
Yeah, the neutral ones, which everyone can get access to. Which I'm a fan of.
Yeah, and it kind of brings me to my next point in that keywords, right? The shared stratagems are good because it keeps us having roughly the same amount of stratagems we're currently using, but they're recognizable, right? Like if I use the, I don't know, command point reroll stratagem, you know what that is because you use it too. You're not going to be like, if I use my tactical manufactorum stratagem, you're like, what's it? What the fuck is that? Oh, it's a reroll. Why the fuck didn't you just say that? Like we've had that conversation, have we not?
We have, yeah. Or, I have a 4-up dauntless willpower roll. What the fuck's that? Oh, it's a field pain. Just say field pain.
Yeah. Which is why I'm glad keywords are coming back, because they're harder to learn upfront. Like I think our first game day is going to be
It's going to be rough.
It's gonna be
It's
a
gonna be a whole lot of
whole
double
lot of it.
checking. Yeah, I wonder. Okay, okay. What if we printed out quick references for the keywords?
Are we gonna have a list of keywords beforehand to be able to do that with?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. All I'm saying is 1 page per person would be helpful.
Yeah.
Like,
I
here's your
agree.
handout. Take your keywords. Take your keywords. Take
Yeah.
your keywords.
Probably do that for the core stratagems as well.
Mm-hmm.
Something we used to do in 7th and 8th edition, because you used to have a chart that was like, if you have this weapon skill versus this weapon skill, you're on this to hit. We used to have those charts on the shop, like on the wall, so people could be like, 4 up. Like, it was very handy.
Yeah, I don't want it to end up like playing tabletop where you have to like remember your modifiers. Oh, it's the number. It's real simple. It's the number -10 divide by 2, round down, and that'll give you your variable. Just
But don't forget about your
you know,
circumstantial bonus.
I'd rather just have a handout.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know that they had prior to this had consolidated keywords.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm happy with consolidated keywords, and it was my favorite thing about 7th edition. Right, when I used World Eaters Berserkers versus Blood Angels Assault Marines, we both had similar rules but slightly different. So like, there used to be a thing called Furious Charge, which was +1 attack on the charge. There's also a thing called Rage that was +1 strength on the charge. But there was also things like
knowledge test. Here we go.
Feel No Pain, Deep Strike. All of these things were just keywords that told you what a unit had. And it makes sense for Marine armies, so those are the same. You're like, oh, that makes Marine versus Marine way easier. They use the same keywords for Tyranids. They use the same keywords for Eldar, for Dark Eldar. So you could play against someone brand new, and you 100% could know what their army did. Like what each unit did. Because they could rattle off like, oh yeah, this is like a 3-up armor save, T5 dude with Feel No Pain. And you're like, oh, I know what that is. I know what that do. That's simple. You didn't have to be like, well, I get this because of this and this because of this. You're like, nope, these are my keywords. It was very consolidated. It was very easy. It was very good. And sometimes they would add keywords randomly, and they would say what units got them. It would be crazy. Some of the keywords were nonsense and useless, though, I will say. Like night fighting.
Never even heard anyone reference it.
So there used to be this... It was called improved senses, because there used to be a rule called night fighting that you rolled for at the beginning of the game, and on a 3-up, the first round would be night fighting, right? Where you could not target someone more than 12 inches away.
Too dark.
Yeah. And then second turn, you would roll on a 4-up to see if it continued, right? And you would do this every game. If you had night fighting, you could ignore that penalty.
Cool.
So like Tau had night fighting because of their tech. Like that was one of their mechanics. Really glad.
We got nods. Love that.
Yeah, really glad it's not going to be a thing, because it kind of made some stuff nonsense. Like super good. Like you know from the greater good Overwatch ability?
Yep.
That was originally a keyword. Anything with the greater good keyword could do Overwatch around anything else with from the greater good keyword.
That was still a thing in 8th. I'm familiar with that.
Like it started in 7th, and it was a keyword that they got, because that's something that they did in 7th edition. Was like factions also got unique keywords, which made it a little more confusing. I don't think they're doing that here, but the weapon keywords also made things much easier, because then when your opponent goes, oh, I have, instead of every weapon having a special unique ability, they would just be like, I have these keywords. Like a Dark Lance and a Last Cannon ostensibly did the same thing with slight variation because they had the same keywords. Makes it a lot more interesting. And easy to explain to your opponent. Like that's the thing I'm the most excited about with keywords, is it opens up a lot of combo potential. It opens up a lot of like choice in weapon choices and army choices. But overall, it makes it much easier to explain to your opponent what you're doing so that they can make an educated choice. and they don't feel like they're getting got.
Yeah, because the thing that's been really weird for us is like, obviously when you're fighting someone new or someone whose units you do not know, you'll ask, hey, what does that thing do? And they might explain it to you like, oh yeah, like it has a deep strike. But the wording on all of them is not uniform. So like you might think you understand, okay, that thing deep strikes. But if that thing's wording around the deep strike or the restrictions are different, it might do something very, very different than to what you're anticipating, and you get gotcha'd. Like, that's an issue that has come up in, like, 8th and 9th, because of slightly different wordings and these individualistic keywords. And, yeah, I look forward to that not being a problem now.
Yeah.
We're speaking just like a universal language that is the same across the board.
And the only thing that is a potential worry with the universal language is that some armies will just do that universal language better. But I think that's just easier to balance than having to rewrite the wording for everything constantly. Like, I don't think people want rules granularity in wording. They want rules granularity in choices.
Yeah.
That is what it is. And like, I'll use an example. Armor of Contempt, right? It was not great. But
it was a Band-Aid.
It was basically a keyword. Like, it was a keyword they handed out to a bunch of people, and they didn't want to call it that. They're like, oh yeah, Armor of Contempt. Everyone was like, power armor. Well then, what about Sisters of Battle? Oh, we forgot they had power armor. I guess they get it too. Well, what about these, like, obscure, random, like, models from the Inquisition? Do they get it? Fuck it. Sure. Like...
What about Custodes? No. What?
Yeah, you could just put it on them. Like, you just put it on them. You just put them, like, the Armor of Contempt on them. Done.
Yeah.
Keyword.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, the keyword itself was clear on what it did, but who got it was not clear.
Could you imagine if they brought back insta-kill weapons? That'd be good. They used to have these weapons that if any wounds got through whatsoever, the whole model would just die.
That's amazing.
It was insta-kill. It worked on monsters, worked on everything. Like,
for some weapons, though, I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Stuff that's, like, real big and heinous.
Yeah, but they also gave that to Grey Knights on all of their melee weapons if they casted a psychic power.
Okay, that's a little much.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, like, across the board, like, I think of things that have, like, big old death beams, right? The big stuff. Like, the Tau Stomper, the big knights with, like, the harpoon thingy, the Eldar big Wraith Lord cannon thing, the big Eldar knight, the Necron giant weapons, the Eradicators. Like, okay, cool. On the big Lords of War, they hit something, it dies. But, like, Grey Knights?
Yeah.
They just got swords.
Yeah, so, like, force weapons used to not just be, like, better power swords. They used to be able to cast a spell that you would turn your force weapons into insta-kill weapons. So any psyker could just be rolling around with, like, an insta-kill sword.
They're just swords!
Yeah.
Seems like a lot to me.
Yeah.
Seems like a lot. I'm here for it on the big cannons.
It's okay, though, because Grey Knights also costed, like, 3 times as much as a normal Space Marine back then, so...
Yeah. I don't know if those balance out, but at least it's something.
They also still only had 1 wound, because all Space Marines had 1 wounds back then. They didn't have the Primaris.
Space Marines and Guardsmen, same number of wound.
Yeah. Only difference is 1 toughness and a slightly better armor save.
And 1 better armor.
Mm-hmm.
Wowee. Best humanity could provide.
What I'm really hoping for is at the beginning of 10th edition doesn't have the conscript bomb that they had in the beginning of 8th, where they were like a build of that degree, because that was nuts. Like, I played a game against an old friend named Toby, who just brought, like, oh yes, I brought 250 conscripts and 6 commissars. Like, that's...
just swamping the board in unwashed prisoner bodies.
Yes. Like, I lost the game because I could not get on objectives.
No, you can't kill them fast enough.
No.
They just keep coming. That's Skaven in 40k.
Yeah. That can technically wound anything on a 6th wound.
Love that.
Yeah, it was great.
Great.
Glad they fixed that. But we've heard about all of these rules that are interesting and callbacks to an old edition. But why is this good, right? Because I overall, spoiler, think it's good. We talked about it earlier on. And I think it's good because at the end of the day, it is showing that GW isn't going to try to reinvent the wheel every time there's a new edition, but they're just going to try to refine it. They've done it through 8th and ninth, and during a big reset from ninth to 10th, because that's what this is a big reset. They're not just throwing everything in the trash. They're taking stuff that worked from previous editions and bringing it up and keeping what worked in the previous edition. So they're iterating on this instead of just trying to go back to the drawing board like they did with 8th. When they went to 8th from 7th, they completely threw out all of the 7th edition stuff. And it's very interesting that they chose not to do that this time. And I think that shows a healthier game design space. I think it shows a more cognizant of their rules GW.
Yeah. And this is stuff I have not played in 7th. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I started in 8th. So, like, I missed 7th and 6th, and I just really heard old tales about it. But I've seen some of these rules implemented in other games, primarily Song of Ice and Fire, which we've played quite a bit of. That is the first time I saw the idea of, like, you have a unit on their tray, and you can pay money to give them a hero leading it. And that hero, brings buffs, much like it's going to do here, to that whole unit. It can add keywords, what have you. The amount of list building depth that brings is immense. Because it opens up the sort of build possibilities to include things that aren't just killy. Which at 40k, oftentimes in 8th and ninth, it felt like the heroes I was bringing were the ones that were turbo killy. Because you had to. But in stuff where they're giving a buff to the rest of their unit, now you might bring a guy who doesn't shoot or hit for anything useful. But his buff to his unit is incredible, yet you're going to bring him anyway. Like, it does matter. It does matter. He's bringing something else to the table that you want. And bringing that to 40k, I think, with their number of heroes, could open up a ton of interesting options for heroes that maybe in the recent memory have not been taken a lot, which is cool. I'm a fan of anything that increases the number of viable options for people to sort of tinker and play with to their heart's content.
Yeah, I think it creates a lot of, like, levers and pulleys that can be pulled on for balance reasons and also just as players, right? Like, we mostly play within our own local group. And, like,
local is really, really in quotes there.
Yeah, because it's over, like, 3 states. But it's, like, we have a core group of people we play with on a fairly regular basis. And when we play, it makes it much easier to be like, hey, like, we know this one detachment is busted, is cranked. Please don't play that one detachment. Because it's much easier just to avoid a detachment than it is to avoid, like, whole-ass armies.
Yeah, you really get into trouble when it's only down to armies or nothing. That creates an immense amount of feel bad.
But honestly, I don't think that's going to necessarily be the case, because if you look at army construction in the way that it looks like it's going in 10th, it looks like there's more than just the does it kill good, does it not die good. There is also, does it hold objective well? Does it move well? Does it do these other things I need to be doing in this game to be functional?
Yeah, the only question is, will something end up with too much of all of that?
Yes.
But that remains to be seen. But hopefully the power is locked to detachments more. And then the units are just like tricky tool pieces that you use to accentuate your detachment's overall goal. Which I think is cool. And for me, like, especially, speaking of detachments, like, being understood, I think the keyword's similar. Like, a lot of power is going to be locked to the keywords. You can just move keywords around however you have to fit your flavor, which is great.
Yeah, and I think limiting some armies' options is just good. Like, I think oftentimes you will see some form of Imperium soup or Chaos soup dominate because you can just cherry pick the stuff from like 9 books.
It's a smorgasbord. They're at the Golden Corral buffet line, picking out the golden plate. Everyone else, you get what you get. Well, I won't say everyone else. Many other factions, you don't have those options.
Yeah, like look at Tau.
But
And then when they've given it to Tau before, because I even tell you about the thing they used to do. Oh, the allies thing, Joe. They used to do allies. There was an allies chart. So some things you were battle brothers. You could bring them like Space Marine, other Space Marines, battle brothers. You can bring them all the time. Uh, Tau and Eldar were allies of convenience, where you could kind of bring things, but you had to bring like HQs of things. You couldn't just like drag and drop everything. But they could give each other psychic powers and buffs. So you could take all of the Eldar like psychic powers that give you like super consistency for shooting and put it on Riptides.
oh god, that sounds tough.
You used to be able to put guidance on Riptides. Then they took that away, and then people were like, "Oh, that's fine. What about debuffs?" And then they would start putting Doom on things. So you could put Doom on units, and then have Riptide shoot them and get a bunch of rerolls to wound. And it was just not fun. Like it was a bad time.
No,
because if you didn't know, the Tau and the Eldar fast friends. They actually fight everything together.
They are absolutely not. Yeah, you can keep the soup away. I'm not a soup fan. So this seems to be mitigating some of that, which I'm a fan of. I like armies being built out of their army book, not out of everyone's army book.
I like soup sometimes, but like in very unique situations. Like I think like a guard with like a half a guard, like most of a guard army mixed with like Genes of their cults. That's a fun soup because like it makes sense. Like it's narrative there.
But you're just playing GSC.
Yes, but they need like the entire guard book doesn't exist in the GSC book. Or like Adeptus Mechanicus bringing a knight, like that feels very good. But when people were like, I brought my company commander and 3 units of guardsmen to bring all of my knights to fuel the command point farm, like that felt bad.
It was weird.
Yeah.
It was very weird.
It felt almost like the Transformers movies where like you had a bunch of humans running around doing tiny little things while all the monsters fought, like all the robots fought.
Well, all the robots fired huge plasma cannons at each other.
Yeah.
And everyone scampered like squirrels underneath their feet.
Honestly, that unit, like that army list in my head forever will now be remembered as 60 Shia LaBeoufs with like 7 Optimus Primes.
I love that. I'm a huge fan of that. In theory, I did not like it on the tabletop. It felt weird. I'm very sensitive to ludonarrative dissonance, and that felt really, really off.
Or the Guard Custodes one, where you would bring a bunch of Custodes that were like just powerhouses, and they would be fueled by the command point generation of Guard.
Farm?
Yeah. Yes, these brilliant tactical strategists are going to be told what to do by fucking old military peepaw. Like,
yes, Papa Ted. He certainly knows what's going on. He can't read above a first aid level, but the Custodes are taking his orders. Yeah, it don't work for me. And I think we'll see less of that in the new edition, or at least I hope so, because of the way detachments will, from what we've seen, will work. Now, I think that's the way we got to wrap it up. This is early days where we are talking about it, and who knows if there's stuff outside of this that we are missing context for, and that our opinions may shift quickly. But hopefully that's not the case.
And we can revisit this later to see if we were gloriously wrong.
Could be. I'm always willing to believe that I'm terribly, terribly wrong.
Yeah. I'm going to love in like 6 months we're sitting there talking and be like, man, we said that this wasn't going to happen, and it 100% happened, and we are fucked.
We're terrible. We can't call anything. I don't know. Fingers crossed that's not the case. But we'll see. But speaking of, stuff coming out, there is going to be Warhammer Fest coming out in a week, as we mentioned at the beginning. We are going to probably be doing some talking about Warhammer Fest
Yes.
after that, just to prep everybody. Hopefully, we come out of that with an idea of what the box set is. Hopefully, we know when the release is. As well as, like, a lot of the stuff that needs context around the game. Hopefully, we'll get it at Warhammer Fest. So stay tuned as we work on the next episode, which hopefully will bring some much needed concrete answers to questions that we've just, up until now, been stuck just giving a little shrug to.
Yeah.
'Cause who knows? And we are getting ready for a big push when 10th drops to try to get everybody up to speed. We are doing quite a bit of work behind the scenes to try to get ready for that. So stay tuned. And if you've got any thoughts about how wrong we are and you want to tell us, feel free to send it over on Instagram or Twitter. We are on both. We would love to hear how wrong we are or hear your ideas for stuff you want to hear us talk about 10th or anything else. We always appreciate it, and they're always open. Now, that's been all of our opinions. Bona fide, Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all in the next one.